Welcome to the Chicago Golf Report podcast.
So you're one of a small number of folks who've been able to kind of see the world from the biggest perspective in terms of the golf business, right? So you've been able to be on PGA Tour events, you've been at major championships, and then you work with USA Junior Golf Team and all the way up. So can you share maybe a memorable moment or a lesson that you learned from observing the top players that you incorporate into your teaching?
Wow, that's a great question right off the bat. So, yeah, I have always maintained that uh, I was going to learn more from PGA Tour players than they were ever going to learn from me. So, coaching PGA Tour players, Live Tour players, LPGA Tour, Champions Tour, is such an enormous opportunity for a instructor to learn, because let's be honest, their golf game was nothing to speak of. So um, what ends up happening, and sometimes maybe listen, you have a bigger opportunity when you have a kid from 8 to 18 years old, right, than you do with a PGA Tour player. So what ends up happening when you coach PGA Tour players is you turn a little bit into what I would call a fixer. Okay. But in the process, in other words, I missed the cut last week. I'm broke. So fix me.
Mhm.
Right. So as much as that doesn't well me up inside with where, with what I'm actually there to do, it's a perfect opportunity as you're quote unquote fixing them. By the way, I don't find them inherently broken. They still hit better shots than I've ever dreamed of. But as you do that, if you're paying attention, there's little, I think the kids would call it cheat codes. There's little opportunities to learn. Oh, that's why they are where they are, right? So,
Mhm.
um, what have I? The question was, what have I implemented? So the USA Junior Golf Team is a very good example of this, because I I only tell the parents this later. I go, the USA Junior Golf Team is not the kids. Actually, it's not all of these kids. They are on the team, but the funniest thing is USA Junior Golf Team is not them. It's the team of experts I put around them. So, be it swing coach, be it Dr. Jeremy Smith for strength conditioning, inevitable aches and pains, so on and so forth. We always say, like, you won't need rehab if you prehab, right? So, short game experts, the PGA Tour players that I work with, right, that I have come in, I guilt them into training with these kids, right? So, the USA Junior Golf Team is the team I put around an individual junior. It is not necessarily that there's a bunch of kids and we're calling them a team. Heck, that's their high school team, that's their college team, so on and so forth. It's the team of experts I put around a player, and it's far bigger than me, right?
Mhm.
So I can't be the voice of everything, nor do I want to be. I can't be everyone's swing coach. Again, nor do I want to be. I've always maintained that basically, uh, I actually don't believe that. The problem, and I have three boys, right? And they have varying levels of interest in golf currently, and that tends to that tends to vary over time and over their life and over their development. But I think the overwhelming thing that you have to fight in the crucible that is junior golf, and if you're a parent there, is that you believe your child is not seeing what you're seeing. My philosophy has always been that the child is seeing a lot.
Mhm.
So, and I'm not necessarily sure you're supposed to get in front of mistakes. It would be my strategy, and, and I learned this from the behavioral sciences, is that, um, the the obstacle is the direction that you should head in, because that is the biggest opportunity and for which the player to develop and thus learn. So what I tell people is I actually don't coach juniors. I coach parents and I guide juniors. I think the most important thing for inevitable struggle is for that junior to know that you're there for them, and that you've been there, and that you've been there with other players, and that you've seen this before, and it's all good. I think the issue is, especially with the parents that have never done this, right? Like they themselves, their handicap is nothing to write home about. They believe success to be linear. Starting here, we're gonna move straight that way. Well, over time, it'll, when you get far enough away, it'll appear as all they did was just take off like a rocket ship. But really only the coach and the player will know about the pitfalls along the way, and the habits that were created, and the avenues gone down that did not serve that player. So, I always say a great coach wasted a lot of time, and the reason that they're a great coach is that their players don't have to make the mistakes or waste the time that they did. Again, the mistakes are inevitable, but so here's the thing: the mistakes I made was because I just told you, hey, with players, struggle is inevitable. The mistakes I made was blowing it the hell up, right? And the mistakes parents make is blowing it the hell up. Oh, he played bad, we gotta change everything. We gotta change coaches, we gotta change programs, we gotta change everything. So the funniest thing is, as much as I may never see that kid again or his family again, which is, it is what it is. Honestly, I was guilty of that when I was a kid too. I was guilty of, I hit it bad today, thus my swing is bad and it needs to be changed. So no, it's all part of the process in retrospect. And that's what I try to help parents with. Again, I coach parents, I guide children. And if you have them believe that success is completely linear, then there's going to be an inherent you're going to add to the frustration of development, right? And there will already be frustration. I have such a respect for those that want to undertake this, because your name and a score next to your name on the internet's, that's a bold undertaking, and you should be applauded for attempting it. You really should. And I'm not the participation ribbons type. I'm really not. But at the same time, you are undertaking this, and for that you should be applauded.
So let's stick to that then. Let's stick to the junior side of the game. Like a lot of people, I watched the Olympics this summer. I watched as many sports as possible. I really enjoyed it. And one of the things that struck me was the difference between the joy that comes out in the players in the game. So if you would say, why do we play sports? Typically, if you're getting into it as a child, it's because you love it, right? It's fun, it's enjoyable. And if I looked at all the sports I watched at the Olympics, the game that provided the most joy, seemingly, from the players based on their smiles was volleyball. And I like every point, they all get together and they clap hands and they're like cheering each other on. And if you kind of look at that lens at other sports, golf, for instance, there's not as much seeming joy, right? You might get a smile. Usually it's a scowl. Even like Tiger, you very rarely will get even a smile out of him. So what do you do to add more joy to the game of golf? Or perhaps is it not as difficult to do that with juniors?
Great question. I think about this all the time. So I think institutions such as the PGA of America, which I'm wearing my PGA Championship hat, and I was down there. Got some great stories, learned a lot. Again, if you're just paying attention. But I think the PGA of America and other programs or institutions or either that'd be on the macro level. The micro level is the programs and classes and private lessons and golf classes. Basically, this we are told that if we improve, we'll enjoy it more. So sounds harmless. And unfortunately, though, the best players that I've been around are PGA Tour players, and they inherently are the most miserable. So I'm not quite sure that being great at golf means that you'll be happy. So I think what we should do as instructors, and again, this is focused around juniors so far, which is awesome. I think, and this sounds very sing-songy. This sounds very, well, that's what you say. But I think the first thing that you do to develop a junior is you teach love. Now, love of the game, and if you're building a tournament player, needs to be love of competition, love of figuring stuff out. If struggle is inevitable, then you have to be this guy or this lady that enjoys the process of figuring it out, right? Enjoys that. So in a way, everybody loves good golf, but I don't think everybody loves golf. And the handicap system says 30% of the time you're going to really struggle to play to your handicap. So I guess 30% of the time you're absolutely supposed to be miserable. You should come home, kick your dog, and be mean to your wife. Right. So what a great thing to do on an 85-degree day in the summer without a cloud in the sky. Right. So what you got to teach is love, because if you don't teach love, they're not inclined to do it. They're not inclined to continue it. They're inclined to bail when the going gets tough. I had a caddy of mine, great guy, Chris, when I used to play golf more often in tournaments and stuff. And he used to say, by the way, he was a 1 or 2 handicap, right? He was also a client of mine, a friend, a caddy, loved being around him. He would always, he was a bureau man. He was in the FBI and very much a perfectionist. Now, perfectionism is probably why he attained the level that he did, darn near a scratch golfer. But at the same time, he would always utter comments like, yeah, I should have taken up weightlifting. By this time, I'd have more to show for it. So you have to be okay with, I tweeted, or we're not calling it tweet anymore. We're saying it's X. But I said this a while ago. It seems to be that the people that are the most consistent are the ones that are most okay with the game's inconsistencies. So you have to be okay with it. You don't have to like it, right? And here's the flip side of the coin, because I don't want to be singing sunshine and bouncing Skittles off you, right? Like, I'm okay with some club tossing, right? I'm okay. Well, what I tell kids is just drop it, then you can't throw it. And then they start laughing, right? You saw Billy Horschel over at the DP World. By the way, he won the event. I think he dropped his driver 4 times in 4 days, right? So, like, I'm okay with that. The best golfer I've ever seen, like, I've got 2 golfers down here in my man cave. I've got a black and white, the Hogan, and I got Tiger Woods, with a broken leg, winning the U.S. Open. So those are the 2 angriest golfers I've ever seen. Okay, they're also 2 of the best golfers I've ever seen. Tiger being the best golfer I've ever seen in real time. I mean, Hogan, without some strong smelling salts, we're not going to see much from him. So, so essentially, like, the funniest thing is, it seems to be negative behavior, but it seems to be also the behavior of high achievers. The issue is not like when it happens, if it happens. The issue is, what are you doing with it going forward? I find those golfers to have used it, and I find amateurs to be used by it. So I'm not advocating like, oh, there's this guy on a podcast that said, go ahead, be pissed off. I always tell all my kids and all my players, Jake's a 4-letter word. Go ahead and use it. You know, like when I first started coaching on the PGA Tour, and Kevin was my first client full time out there, though I've been around PGA Tour players since, early 2000, like 2002. He used to when I first showed up at my first event and I have stars in my eyes, he goes, "All right, well, just so you know, if it goes left or right, it's your fault. And if it goes long or short, it's the caddy's fault." Right? So that, I mean, that's the thing. It's like, anger is not inherently bad. It shows that you care, and it actually serves as motivation to continue to hone your craft. But at the same time, are you using it, or are you being used by it? That's the question that I ask. And again, if you are a guy that kind of floats around, like if you're Lee Trevino, be Lee Trevino, right? But if you're Hogan, be Hogan. I think the most important thing in your art is to be yourself, right? And that will lend itself to the best scores. I'm not teaching kids to be, well, again, that's kind of a bold statement in itself. Teaching, I would just say I'm there for kids. Like I'm not trying to make them myself. I'm trying to have them explore themselves through golf. And again, that is all from my background in the behavioral sciences and stuff. It's not about me, it's about them. I find problematic statements that parents make. So here's your little soundbite right here. So parents will say golf parents, but I learned this a long time ago, when I worked for DCFS and I was a child abuse investigator and respite worker, and I thought I was going to be a social worker, right? So I found problematic statements that golf parents make. I want for my child. Most people hearing that don't see an issue with that. I find some problematic terms in that statement. I want. You want. Okay. What do they want? Right? My child. Yes, I have 3 sons, but so you have ownership of the child. And you know what? I know a lot would say, you're damn right, until they're 18 and they move out of here and they start paying rent, right? That actually would have been the house I grew up in. So again, I appreciate that. But it might be your child, but it is their life. And what you want is inconsequential. Sorry. And if you want it more than them, then this will create, I've seen a lot of strained relationships with PGA Tour players and their fathers in the 12 years I've been out there now. So it doesn't matter what you want. It matters what they want. And they might be your child, but it's their life. And in that, you have to understand. So I quote Earl Woods, Training a Tiger. Is that a good book? Should that be required reading? I don't know. Do I have issues with Earl Woods? And again, we're not going to be able to talk to him without some strong smelling salts either. I don't know. He said his child was more important than Gandhi. I have some issues there, but here's a good passage from his book that I do quote often. And I always say a book is great, when people actually used to read. I always say a book's great if it has one or two. If you take one or two things away, then it was totally worth reading. So he said, whether you agree he did this or not, the line is, you cannot instill anything in a child. All you can do is watch for things in a child and then nurture their development.
So let's stay on the development path, but let's go to another end. So you're kind of holistic, right? You use pretty much every tool. You use the psychological bent. You're kind of like, I'd say, an amalgamation of everything as a golf instructor, which from what I've seen, is quite rare. One of the things that you've always been out front with has been technology, and you use a lot of tools. You have your own tool that you used in order to capture analysis, which is a lot different than what we're using 10 years ago. Can you talk a little bit how you use technology, what tools you use, and then what tools that sort of are then bleed over to your players that they access to continue the work on their swing with your help?
Sure. So when you were saying that, the first thought I had was that there is classical and quantum instruction. And yes, I think you have to go between both. I think both are necessary. That was
Hmm.
from the book Quantum Golf, Rethinking Golf by Chuck Hogan. This was in the 90s.
Hmm.
Quantum Golf was in the early 80s. Rethinking Golf, Chuck Hogan said that all skills are pre-golf skills, skills necessary to play golf. So again, necessary, but not necessarily the playing of the game.
Hmm.
My mentors, Bob Tosky pointed at pictures of Hogan on the wall. Jimmy Ballard would have you with a cup of coffee and he would kind of thumb through a book. Again, pictures. Jim Sutty would be on the cutting edge when it came to the cutting edge of technology, and it was really just high speed cameras, right? So for swing analysis and comparison. So I never forgot what I've learned from essentially 4 to 5 Hall of Famers, in that they were master communicators, and I kind of liked that how they were all different. With that said, yes, I'm very open to technology. I think a very strong statement for an instructor to make is I don't know. And I think any statement that you would make technically has to be based off something that is measured. So I was an original TrackMan owner. Boy, that thing cost more than my car at the time. Like I had this beat up Dodge Neon, but I had an orange box that was in the trunk that cost more than the vehicle. I think a big mistake with young instructors is to buy this technology and then thus they're an expert.
Hmm.
So I like the generation. I like when I learned. I like who I learned from, because I learned how to teach without, and then I completely went all in on implementing technology in. Um, I'm not saying that can't happen now, but the temptation is by the young instructor is to just break the piggy bank, get all the technology, all the 3D, all the force plates necessary. By the way, that's all upstairs in my house. I have my own lab in my house, which the only people I've ever given golf lessons to in here are PGA Tour players, Corn Ferry Tour players, guys like that. So they usually grab a beer right over there, and then they put the suit on up there. So it's a good time. It's a big nerdgasm. So I think effectively what I wanted to do, and my background is in psychology, like you said. I wanted to be able to take complex things such as human movement, but be able to relate that in a way that is very digestible, approachable for that student in the moment. In other words, take something that's very grand and make it seem very small, so they could go out and play with it. I love when a guy goes, "Yeah, I can go right to the first tee with this."
Hmm.
So it's keeping the mind in mind. With that said, you're referencing something that I've gotten into with Motion to Coach Fenris out of Germany, Aachen, Germany, which I got to go over. It's so the thing that's so fun about this whole thing that you said, major championships, businesses, speaking engagements, is that I've gotten to travel the world.
Hmm.
And I mean, it just, my mother's like shocked. She like doesn't venture out. She works in real estate, but other than that, she's kind of a homebody, either here or up at the lake. By the way, so am I, but I probably would have done that had I not had all this stuff going on. So, anyways, Motion to Coach, what is that? So I think where we're at in golf instruction is that we're able to measure things markerlessly through the iPhone. I'm talking to you through an iPhone right now. And the funniest thing is, I've always been interested in measuring athletes while they compete. So I think there's a lot to learn in a garage like me, like I have, or Dr. Kwan or Sasha McKenzie up in Canada. I think there's a lot to learn from there. And I love their research papers, and I've always kind of read that and tried to implement what these extremely smart people are telling us. But at the same time, hitting a foam golf ball into a wall is not playing golf.
Mhm.
So that gets back. So again, we'll go to the the definitions, the classical, right? All of these graphs, all of these, they move like this. Well, they move like that in a gymnasium when they hit a foam golf ball, right? Or when they're in a 5-iron and hitting into a screen, right? So it's still not playing golf. So it's a big, huge, bold assumption that now I will say a lot of that data is definitely worthwhile, and to me that makes more sense than going onto YouTube or Instagram, which I have both, and thinking that tip is for you. Like, I would base it more off that data of you, right? The problem in golf instruction is you need to be involved in it, right? Too many people are getting their golf instruction from people or teachers they've never met, and basing it off of patterns that they don't do.
Mhm.
So I would base a lot of that off of that. But my thing has always been, as a performance coach, and again, everyone, like most places I see, if I Google me, it says swing coach, and I'm fine with that. That's cool, because on the PGA Tour level, that gets back to being a fixer, right? But I'm a performance coach, and I am so accepting and inviting of the latest technology. But my thing is, I want to be able to start measuring people while they compete. And that's not going to happen unless we do that market without markers. I mean, guys are not going to go tee off in a major going, put me in the calibration, and I'll freeze, and then hopefully the calibration is correct. So we can do this all from cameras. It doesn't actually have to be from your iPhone, but the interesting thing is all your smartphones every single year are so far ahead of. Everybody knows that the iPhone's camera is better than the iPad's camera, right? And that so trying to keep up with technology is literally just the most technology in the world. People are walking around with their pockets. I believe there's 66 million golfers out there. So I want to bring this information to them. But in terms of the highest level, or in terms of elite level players, I want to measure them as they compete, because there will be stark differences between that and when they hit on the range, or when they hit into a net, or when they hit on a simulator.
Mhm.
And it's important for the player and the coach to understand those differences. Now, you get to still make the choice. Well, he or she should do it like they do in the lab. Okay, that definitely is an avenue that you could explore. Or probably where I would go is, well, when they're inhibited in this scenario, they move this way. So, one, what is the cue for them to realize the inhibition? And then two, what is the plan going forward? As opposed to, well, you do it like this inside, so just do it 1,000 more times and you'll be better at it, right? I don't like that. For me, if the wind's into and out of the left, which tends to be an inhibitor of a lot of right-handed golfers, especially PGA Tour players, I want them they're going to know where the wind's coming from. The caddy helps them with that. So, and there's a northwest wind today. They know that. So when the inhibitor inevitably comes up, one, it's the recognition, the recognition of that, and then two, the plan going forward for that, because that is playing golf. There's not going to be a wind into and out of the left in the simulator, even if it says so, right? Even on the computer game, if it says so, you're not getting hit by that. You're not feeling that. So, golf is like life. I mean, it's just wonderfully imperfect, right? So if you'd like to get better at it, it's actually embracing the imperfections, not training for it in perfect environments.
Mm-hmm. So I got one more question for you before a lightning round that I'm going to go through.
I love it. You've gotten better at this.
This is one thing that this is kind of like off the serious path. This is more of the the business of golf or the world of golf. I think you were aware of it at the time. I thought I saw it that I think this is last winter. Jersey Jerry from Barstool Sports. If you remember, he had a hole-in-one challenge,
Yeah.
and we were all watching it. And I think he started at night, he went overnight, and I think he went on over 24 hours. At one point in time, Tom Brady called in, and there was Max Homa had chimed in. It became a very big thing, and then Jersey Jerry got his hole-in-one. I think it was maybe like 26 hours in, and it was kind of this. I felt like it was a watershed moment because it brought all of us together. I was telling everybody I knew about this, like Jersey Jerry, I never knew before. He was on this quest to get a hole-in-one on his simulator. So I guess getting back to that then, the world of social media, and you have now where maybe perhaps the most powerful people in the game are people like Paige and those with 5-6 million followers, way beyond what we grew up with when it would be like the announcers. Where do you think it's going for social media, social influencers in golf? What do you think's the future is going to look like?
That's a great question. So, yeah, I was aware of that, and probably when that happened, I was a little bit more. This is where. So I told you I learned from PGA Tour players, but I've also learned from my juniors. And again, I think people would say that they should be learning from me. Well, I think they're learning. Everything is such an opportunity if your eyes are wide open. So what I learned the past few years is the power of social media and the power of social media influencers. When we grew up, I only watched the PGA Tour. I still really only watch the PGA Tour. I'm 45 years old. I want to see the best, right? So probably about a year or two ago, I got in a conversation with one of our USA juniors, and I made a comment of a player. Now, I didn't say like Fred Couples, because I know that would be some old guy. Heck, Tiger Woods is probably some old guy, right? So, and I go, I said a player that was playing well currently on the PGA Tour. And that, and I'm talking to a 12-year-old or something. They had no idea who that was, right? And it could have been Max Homa, it could have been Schauffele, it could have been John Rahm, it could have been Rory McIlroy, and they had no idea who that was. But they did know who Grant Horvat was, and they did know who Garrett Clark was. And the funniest thing is Bryson DeChambeau is a YouTuber to them, not the two-time U.S. Open champion, which, I've spent some time with him too. Everybody in 3D spent some time with Bryson. So, so what I realized, in the moment, I kind of picked on the fact that their generation is watching this. So probably what was going to bring me into social media is watch again. Remember, I would not waste much time unless I'm watching the best. So Bryson's channel is far better than anything on TV nowadays, and I can say that to you, that the whole breaking 50 thing, that's what. But by the way, what a mindset! What am I? Oh, if we just make hole one on the seventh, if we just chip in for eagle on the last hole, we could I'm like, wow, what a mindset! Like, wouldn't that be good? Wouldn't that be good to think that way, right? All the time, every shot, like, it's okay. We'll just, we'll make 6 more eagles. It's like, wow. Like, most people double the first hole or bogey the first hole, and it's like, today's going to be a bad day, and they base it off their first tee shot. And so anyways, I started watching Break 50, and I loved it for the social experiment. And by the way, the only reason I can tell you who Grant Horvat or Garrett Clark is, or Fat Perez, is actually because of Bryson's channel. So you know what ended up happening? What ended up happening is that I started watching those other guys' channels, and I made a vow that I would never watch a guy on YouTube that I would have a chance of beating. Like, I'm not going to beat a PJ. I'm not going to beat Bryson DeChambeau.
Mm-hmm.
But all of a sudden, I started watching Bob Does Sports, and you know what? And I no offense, Bob, he seems like a great guy. I could beat that guy.
Mm-hmm.
But and I play 6, 7 times a year. But here's the thing. They had these fireball challenges, 27 fireball shots in 9 holes.
Mm-hmm.
So here's the strategy towards getting Coach Jake out on a golf course. One, I'll play par threes with my sons. It's the greatest day of my life.
Mm-hmm.
Two, I'll play top 100 golf courses,
Mm-hmm.
which I get invited to every now and again. And the funniest thing, I played Chicago golf a few weeks ago. I had not played golf. I had not seen a golf ball outside in the air above a sand wedge in 2.5 months.
Mm.
But they told me the night before, and I'm like, yeah, I'll be there. I'm like, I don't even care. It's
Mm-hmm.
Chicago golf, right? I
Mm-hmm.
never know when's the last time I'm playing there, and I've had the good fortune of playing there a few times. But and then the last thing is that we hold a event every year for wounded warriors, the Captain Kevin Landek Cup. If you do follow me on social media, you'll see the CKLMC. Always tagged, always on our hats, always on our shirts, no matter what we play, scrambles, whatever. So basically, the third strategy towards getting Jake on the golf course would be one of my college buddies who are my greatest friends in the world. And we go out there, and I'm not saying we do 27 fireball shots in 9 holes, but
Mm-hmm.
we do play music. We do enjoy a beverage or 10.
Mm-hmm.
We do talk a little smack to each other. We do place a little bets, but nothing that's going to hurt anybody in that group or make them go poopy diapers. And that's where I live right now. I live in a place where yeah, I'd like to play well, but you have to move on to this place where the score doesn't really matter, and not let golf ruin a 75-degree day. So,
Mm-hmm.
anyways, going back to your social media question, Bob Does Sports. That group looks like my group, and they talk to each other like my group. And I am definitely watching guys that are not plus handicaps,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm tuning in because I'm like, gosh, that looks like my game. That sounds like my game.
Mm-hmm.
Just a bunch of guys out there playing loud music, laughing when they don't hit a good one, but celebrating when they do. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I always told my wife, I go, there's a lot of guys that, the funniest thing is, if I'm out there with my buddies, you don't have to worry about me.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You don't have to worry about anything. Like it is total bromance going on. Not
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So uh, where do I think it's going? Well, I'm going to bring up Roger Steele, who's a good friend, a client of mine, and he's just amazing. At first, when I first met him, he wanted to play on the PGA Tour,
Mm-hmm.
which he was good enough. I believe he won. I might have this wrong, but he won an amateur event by it was either the Joliet Am, the Chicago Am, or something, and then he won that by 6. And then he was finishing first and second all these amps. So Roger could really play for a guy that basically took golf off in college.
Mm-hmm.
And then he's like, no, I want to be a long drive guy. So he did that for a while, right? I totally respect the trying of things, right? If somebody goes, well, you always knew you wanted to be a teacher? I'm like, no, I've cut greens, I've picked ranges, I've run the outside service staff, I've taken care of a membership, I've been a club professional, I've been a bartender at courses, I've worked banquets, I've done every job you can think of at a golf course, right? I was a dishwasher as a kid, so on and so forth. So that kind of sees how you fit. So I really love that about Roger. Like, Roger's this big influencer now, and he can't, turn on the TV and you still see him on there for Callaway commercials and during the PGA Championship and stuff. Roger tried everything and saw where he fit. And basically, you got a strapping black man with a great golf game who can hit the ball 330 yards. And then, by the way, I always knew this because I knew him, has something to say.
Mm. Mhm.
One, he can be entertaining and funny, but two, he can also be real. And he's got an amazing personality and a head on his shoulders. Jeremy will have Bubby Golf in the clinic and stuff. Tom Borders,
Mhm.
which I don't call him Bubby, I just call him Tom. But Bubby Golf, who my kids love, by the way, and we're trying to get
Mhm.
him to come down and hang out with kids. I think they go crazy, but he's with Good now and stuff like that
Mhm.
too. Um, it's interesting. Where is it going? I think people are trying to find themselves. And I think when I was a kid, this is like so my first two golf books I ever bought was Greg Norman's 101 Lessons and
Mhm.
Fred Couples' Total Shot Making. Guess who my two favorite players were when I got into golf? Okay. So I read those books, and all I realized was that they were really good and I wasn't.
Mm.
But I already knew that.
Mhm.
So I was looking for information, a plan on how to get better, and it wasn't until I realized that Greg Norman took lessons from Butch Harmon at the time, and Nick Faldo took lessons from David Ledbetter.
Mhm.
That's when I started going the instructional route because it was a little too more of a plan, more of how to. Everybody's got a
Mhm.
tip, but no one has a plan for you. So I enjoyed those a little bit more, had a little bit more substance to it.
Mhm.
Again, there was a disconnect with Fred Couples and Greg Norman. They're great, and I'm not,
Mhm.
and I knew that. So, so essentially, I think what people are looking for in social media is to find someone that is very much like themselves. Where
Mhm.
I got this Bob Does Sports and Fat Perez and all of them, and they're just having a good old time. And I'm sitting there going, well, geez, that's where my golf game's at these days, right?
Mm.
I'm
Mhm.
open to playing well. I'm open to hitting great shots. Oh my gosh, when I got out of college, and I was playing all these tournaments and I was still playing. I just played in the state amateur. That was my last tournament as an amateur. I
Mhm.
qualified for the Illinois Open. That's my first event as a professional. And
Mhm.
all of these things, people would ask me to play. I'm playing in a pro-am scramble tomorrow, Walter, right?
Mm. Mhm.
People would ask me out in Indiana. So people would ask me to play in these. And I'm like, I'm not playing in a scrap. I'm a tournament. Like, are you kidding me? Like, I'm not playing with a bunch of hacks in it. Now, the funniest thing is, I love team golf.
Mhm.
I love the event we run. I love playing in these scrambles with my college buddies. I would. Here's another thing. Like when the cart covers, and by the way, we have it down to a science now. We're like those guys, which we also have this down to a science. We're like the guys that are professional tailgaters at a Bears game. So so I played in a scramble end of December last year, again with
Mhm.
my college buddies. I'm not going out there and like shooting a score for me, like, hey, you want to play golf today? No.
Mhm.
But we got the cart covers, we've got the propane heaters, we've got the iPad in there, we have surround sound, we've got the football game, we've got the golf, we've got cigars. So when we open up these things, it come out, it looks like Cheech and Chong, for crying out loud, but it's cigars for the most part. And then yeah, alcohol and all this stuff. Bourbon keeps you warm even if it's 38 degrees. So
Mhm.
essentially, they talked me into this, and at the end of that, I had a blast. It was
Mhm.
like ice fishing. It was so freaking cold. Ball's
Mhm.
going nowhere. The ground's solid. But I did that for the camaraderie,
Mm.
right? So I would have told you out of college when I saw the members at Ruffled Feathers putting the cart covers on.
Mhm.
They're like, hey, we got an opening. I play with them all the time. They're like, hey, we got an opening. You want to play? I go, the fact that you're putting that on a cart tells me golf season's over, and no, I don't want to play.
Mm.
The funniest thing is with all the technology, with the simulator in my house and all this stuff, I find myself I've hit so many golf balls on the range in my life. I was a grinder, right? You hit 500 balls a day, teaching buckets, all that kind of stuff, trying to find a swing, dig it out of the dirt. Ben Hogan. The funniest thing now with all of this stuff right? Like, I'll show you over here. Like, there's the putting green, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's the replica hole of,
Mm-hmm.
my favorite place on earth. With all of this stuff, we train kids, the USA Junior team at X Golf, right? We have them at the Dome at Links and Tees and stuff for our sports camps and stuff like that. With
Mm-hmm.
all that stuff, I now at 45 find myself yearning to be on grass and
Mm.
on the golf course.
Sure.
And I quote Bill Harmon a little bit. Bill Harmon goes, I'm a little swing geeked out, right?
Mm. Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying I am yet. I'm still very interested in, there's things we can't measure, and I know that's coming too. I'm going to be very interested in that. But at
Mm-hmm.
the same time, when it comes down to it, what is it? The field of dreams, the smell of the grass, the feel of the grass, right? I
Mm-hmm.
still just love being on the golf course. And again, I've reached a point where the score doesn't matter. And that gets back to love. That gets back to teaching the kids love. I remember playing before the mowers at Arrowhead in Wheaton in the morning where I had to get out in front of the mower. So the first hole I had to play in the dark, essentially. I always recommend playing in the dark because you really have to use your other senses. I did that at the Ocean course at Kiowa, and the
Mm.
caddy, it's pitch black on 18, and I made him this, again, another way to get me to play, get me on a top 100 course. So 17, barely any light, playing pretty well, actually. It was a calm day for the Ocean course. The entire defense of that course is the wind off the ocean. I'm
Mm.
telling you, it's a very playable golf course. I know it's rated it's the wind.
Mm.
So it was a calm day. I was playing very well. So it's pitch black. We cannot see. 17 was pushing it. It was
Mm-hmm.
par 3, so we did it. I go to the caddy. I go, I want to play 18.
Mm-hmm.
If we don't find the ball at any point, we'll just walk in. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So he goes, fine. And I go, and I made the comment, I go, this reminds me of high school golf in Chicago anyway, right? Playing the last hole in the dark, being able to see that 3-footer barely. So I hit the ball and I looked at him. And again, I'd been playing pretty well that day. I looked at him, I go, that was pretty good. I go, we'll just walk straight down the middle and hopefully we'll find it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sure enough, right there.
Mm.
I cannot see the green. He tells me to aim at a window that is illuminated from there, and the pin should be right there, and that's the middle of the green. I hit it. I look at him. I go, that was pretty good. So I go, it's got it. I go, I assuming I took the right club, I go, I think we're good. We get up there. The hardest shot to hit was the putt on 18. So
Mm.
it was about a 6-footer. I can't read it, and I've never been there before, so I have no idea. And I told him, I go, you just tell me where to aim it. I can't tell. I can't tell if this is straight. I can't tell if it's right to left, left to right. It does look uphill, right? And I go, you tell me where to aim it, and I'll just go. And sure enough, right in the middle, right? So there was other senses at bay. Now, I easily could have snipe hooked it left like Hale Irwin did in the Ryder Cup and never found the damn thing too. I'm open to that, and I'm good for one of those every now and again. But it didn't happen. And the funniest thing is, in the moment, I remembered my high school experience,
Mm.
and in the moment, I wanted to play 18 not for the score but for the execution.
Mm.
And when it all comes down to it, that's actually all we have is the execution. So many people try to play mind games with themselves to secretly get results.
Mm.
And the brain is far, far too smart for that.
Mm-hmm.
All you actually have is the execution. And why we total them up after 9 or after 18, I have no idea. You've played the first hole of golf in your life. You haven't played the last. Why we break them up as such, I have no idea. But if you just give yourself to the execution, not because it's going to shoot good scores, not because your handicap's going to go down, but because that's actually all that you're out there to do, is I think then that's the love, and then that'll be the wanting to persevere through dark moments, especially ones without explanation.
Mm-hmm. So let's finish up then. As I mentioned, I'd like to do a lightning round. In fact, I'm going to limit you
Okay.
to a minute.
Okay.
Just so it's kind of like Around the Horn and those types of shows where I'll get you going because you're going to be able. I'm going to give you someone from your Instagram feed that you've talked about, and so I'm going to give you a minute to talk about them, to just kind of go off the cuff. And I'm sure you could go on for a long time.
Is there multiple questions here, or is it just the one guy? Or
One person, 1 minute. So
That's
let's
it.
start
That's
with.
Okay.
And I'll start the timer after I name the person. So let's start with the recent Illinois PGA Players Championship winner, Jeff Kellen.
So Jeff Kellen. So first thing that comes to my mind is the first time I met him. I realized that from tee to green, just pure ball striking. If it's a full swing, Jeff Kellen is every bit as good as your average PGA Tour player. I also realized with my years of working with him, spent about 2-3 years now, that when it came to around the greens and hitting wedges, he would admit as such that there was a disparity there. So the lesson to learn from Jeff Kellen, who is my first club professional to qualify for a major championship, and actually one of my most proudest moments as a coach, is that keep your strengths strong, but work on your weaknesses. For the longest time, I never looked at Jeff's full swing. We just worked on wedges and wedge flight, and that improved his scores.
Nice. Awesome. Next person. Two-time Illinois Open champion, Vince India.
Vinny is my guy. I love Vinny. Vinny, the funniest thing is that the lesson to learn from him is that great ball strikers. So high people that aren't lazy tell themselves they're lazy all the time, right? You're being lazy, and so then they get to work. Great ball strikers always kind of tell themselves that they're not hitting it great enough, and that's Vinny. I remember Vinny going, well, there's stripey and there's Corn Ferry stripey. And then I told him, I go, you're number one in greens of regulation as you make that comment. So I think you're pretty stripey. So the issue there, when you deal with a great ball striker, is that you have to keep their strength strong. You have to keep their ball striking. You have to keep an eye on what has made them what they are.
Next person is Bobby Diaz.
Bobby Diaz. So Abraham Answer told me that your guy, meaning Bobby, because they're best friends, he goes, your guy is the best wedge player in the world. And I told Abe, I go, I thought you were. And he goes, I'm not as good as Bobby. Here's another opportunity to learn. I think Bobby Diaz knows how to play golf better than most human beings on planet Earth. And everybody goes, and he's been on the PGA Tour, and everybody goes, how is that possible? What about Dustin Johnson, Tiger Woods, all this stuff? Well, the funniest thing is Bobby Diaz hits at lengths that are very achievable by most competent players, and yet can shoot 61, 62, so on, with no margin for error because he is a shorter hitter in the modern game. So Dustin Johnson isn't that great. He just has wedge.
Let's go to Bob Toski.
Bob Toski, best story I got on him is that there's Bob and there's Bob Toski, and Bob's a really nice guy. Bob Toski, when he's on stage, is a son of a bitch. And so he basically spent the entire days with me, telling me I didn't know anything and I couldn't help anybody. And then at lunch, we'd go out to lunch, and he was driving, and he almost hit every mailbox on the way there because he was 91 years old. I showed him a picture. He wanted to see a picture of my sons, and I showed him, and he told me that my life was just beginning. And he goes, "Do you know what golf stands for?" I go, "No." And I'm like, geometrically orientated linear force. But I didn't say that. He would have punched me. He goes, "No, it stands for everything that's important: God, others, love, and family." That's Bob.
So two more. Kevin Streelman.
Yeah, I've heard of him. So I've had the unfair advantage of growing up with a world-class player and a world-class ball striker. At the peak of his powers, he was seventh in greens of regulation and hopefully looking to make his 300th cut on the PGA Tour, uh, hopefully this week, if not soon. That is a milestone on itself. It's so funny how people know tour players, like, chasing majors and all this stuff, but Kevin's career is there's a lot of people. He has never lost his card. He's been on the PGA Tour since 2008, but I've known him since he was 11 or 12 years old.
Mhm.
I've seen greatness from him at every age, at every level. And the thing is that you should take away from Kevin is the work. Is that guy will put 10 to 12-hour days in every day, because industry leaders work 12-hour days.
Mhm. And then finally, the last person is very familiar with your house. You're very familiar with him. It's social media sensation Ashton Thurm.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, it's that time of year again where my son will be forever 1.5 years old. Yeah, so there is a video, and there might be people watching this go, I've seen that video. I didn't know it was you. It's picked up in every country, in every language. The Golf Channel grabs it, everything, of my 1.5-year-old, probably with a full diaper, with a binky in his mouth, in Santa jammies, making putts right here on the screen. And every year, somebody sees it and it's new to them, and they go crazy. So he's like Macaulay Culkin. Macaulay Culkin is basically 9 years old every time it's Christmas, and my son Ashton will be 1.5 forever. He played in one tournament this year for the first time, and yeah, he did pretty well. So